Imagine if the entirety of human history, the sprawling chronicles of ceaseless conflict, the rise and ruin of magnificent empires, the petty, burning resentments fueling every single family feud, all traced its twisted origins back to three seemingly simple elements: a pristine garden, a calculating serpent, and a solitary piece of forbidden fruit. Genesis is a deep well of secrets, narratives that have fueled theological arguments for countless ages. Why did the divine favor the pastoral sacrifice of one brother while turning away from the agricultural labor of the other? What terrifying, unexplained hybridity occurred when the mysterious sons of God descended and took mortal women as their wives? How did a mere slave, rotting in an Egyptian dungeon, manage to ascend beyond all expectation to command more temporal power than the reigning pharaohs? This text transcends mere folklore or spiritual mythology. It is the raw, unadulterated record of humanity's first acts of malice, its inaugural deceptive maneuvers, and the foundational, enduring covenants that continue to structure our modern world. You will discover the poignant irony. The father deceived by the bloodied coat of his favorite son is the very same man who once masterfully tricked his own blind, aging patriarch. You will witness the epic reversal as the brother who was sold into bondage becomes the unexpected savior and ultimate provider for those same family members who had cruelly betrayed him. You will understand why every major global faith traces its spiritual lineage back to one solitary man's staggering, faith-fueled decision to abandon everything: his homeland, his family, his past, for a promised territory he had never once laid eyes upon. 50 monumental chapters spanning thousands of years, bound by one unbroken, profound thread connecting the moment of creation to the formation of sovereign nations. The complex patterns concealed within the book of Genesis did not just document, they meticulously predicted everything that followed. Are you prepared to confront the pivotal truths you have previously overlooked? In the beginning, before time was measured, before any substance existed, there was absolute, unqualified nothingness. No flicker of light, no stable expanse of land, no stirring of life. Only the abyssal, vacant darkness cloaking the deep. Yet God was present within that void. The inaugural sentence of Genesis thunderously declares, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." Then, the divine voice cut through the silence. On the first day, a command resonated: "Let there be light," and instantaneously, light tore the darkness apart. He defined the boundary between the nascent light, which he named day, and the lingering shadow, which became night. Cosmic boundary established. On the second day, God sculpted the firmament, the sky. He separated the vast, formless waters, elevating a portion above and grounding the remainder below, thereby engineering the atmospheric expanse between them. This space, the vault above, he designated as heaven. The third day saw the emergence of dry, stable ground. God drew the chaotic waters together into expansive basins, forming the seas, allowing the terra firma to appear, which he termed earth. But the creative process was far from finished. That same day, he commanded the earth to spontaneously generate lush vegetation, including seed-bearing plants and trees laden with fruit, establishing the foundation of the biological world. And it materialized precisely according to his authoritative word. Day 4 brought forth the great celestial bodies to inhabit the recently formed sky. Genesis 1 verse 16 states, "And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. The immense sun, the reflective moon, and the countless stars took up their fixed positions, serving as cosmic clocks to regulate seasons, days, and years. On the fifth day, life exploded dramatically in both the hydro and atmospheric realms. God created spectacular sea creatures of every imaginable size and species, alongside all the birds that soared across the sky. He conferred a blessing upon them, commanding in Genesis 1 verse 22, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth." The sixth day was the climactic crescendo of creation. God populated the land with every form of terrestrial animal, domesticated livestock, small creatures that crept, and the great wild beasts. Each one was brought into existence adhering meticulously to its specific kind. Then came the ultimate achievement, the crowning definitive act. Genesis 1 verses 26 to 27 records the divine counsel. And God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." Thus, God created humanity in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. He conferred his blessing upon them, vesting them with authority and stewardship over every entity he had brought into being. He designated the plants and trees as their primary source of sustenance. Surveying the totality of his labor, Genesis 1 verse 31 affirms, "God saw everything that he had made, and, behold, it was very good. On the seventh day the Creator ceased his labor." God rested, not from exhaustion, but to consecrate a model for human observance. He blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, setting it eternally apart from the 6 days of work. Following this grand 6-day schema, God undertook a more intimate, specialized creation of man. Genesis 2 verse 7 states, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." God then established a magnificent garden in Eden, a paradisiacal sanctuary overflowing with beauty and boundless provision, and placed the newly formed man there with the purpose of cultivating and safeguarding it. At the heart of this divine sanctuary stood 2 trees of profound significance, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God granted the man complete liberty to partake of any fruit in the garden, save for one crucial prohibition. He warned in Genesis 2 verse 17, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die." Soon, God observed a deficiency in the perfect setting. The man was alone. He declared in Genesis 2 verse 18, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an help meet for him." God presented all the terrestrial creatures to the man to be named, but none provided the suitable partnership required. So, God induced a deep, profound sleep to fall upon the man, carefully removed one of his ribs, and from that bone, he meticulously fashioned the woman. Upon waking and seeing her, the man erupted in recognition and joy, exclaiming in Genesis 2 verse 23, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man." They existed in a state of unblemished innocence, both completely naked, yet experiencing no shame or self-consciousness. But into this pristine environment slithered the voice of insidious skepticism. The serpent, possessing a cunning far surpassing any creature crafted before him, approached the woman with insidious doubt. Did God truly say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? After the woman articulated the precise boundary, that to even touch the central tree would result in death, the serpent delivered the devastating counter-truth, shattering the divine mandate. His lie, recorded in Genesis 3 verses 4 to 5, was a promise of forbidden empowerment. "Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." The woman observed the tree with a newly awakened craving. The fruit now appeared appetizing for consumption, aesthetically pleasing to the eye, and fiercely desirable because of the promise of heightened insight and wisdom. She took the fruit and ate it without hesitation. She then offered some to her husband, who was present with her, and he too willingly consumed it. Immediately, the universe shifted on its axis. Genesis 3 verse 7 notes the instant change. "And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons." Later, as the mild coolness of the day descended, they heard the sound of God moving through the garden, and motivated by unprecedented shame, they frantically hid themselves amongst the dense foliage. God called out, asking, "Where art thou?" The man, trembling, confessed that he had concealed himself because he heard God's voice and was conscious of his nakedness. God posed the critical question, "Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree?" whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat." The man immediately deflected the blame onto his companion. "The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat." The woman, in turn, passed the culpability to the tempter. "The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat." God then pronounced a series of solemn judgments upon each party. To the serpent, he declared an eternal, relentless hostility with humanity. To the woman, he decreed that pain would be drastically multiplied during childbirth, and that her deepest relational yearning would be directed toward her husband, who would henceforth rule over her. To the man, God laid out the grim reality of life outside Eden, recorded in Genesis 3 verses 17 to 19. "Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." In an act of mercy, God fashioned garments of animal skin for them. The first recorded death, a necessary sacrifice to cover the devastating spiritual consequence of their transgression. Then he uttered a chilling statement in Genesis 3 verse 22. "Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever." Consequently, God expelled them from the Edenic sanctuary and stationed cherubim, wielding a continuously revolving, flaming sword, at the garden's eastern entrance to secure and guard the path to the tree of life. Outside of paradise, life grimly continued. The man named his wife Eve, recognizing that she would be the matriarch of all subsequent life. She bore a son and declared, "I have gotten a man from the Lord." She named him Cain. Later, she conceived and bore a second son, Abel. The two brothers grew up and selected fundamentally different vocations. Abel became a shepherd, tending flocks, while Cain devoted himself to tilling the unforgiving soil. In the course of time, both brothers prepared offerings for God. Genesis 4 verses 3 to 4 describes the moment. "And in process of time it came to pass, that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof." God acknowledged and accepted Abel's offering, but he pointedly did not accept Cain's. The text offers no explicit rationale for the rejection, but the outcome was immediate and devastating. Cain's face fell and consuming anger began to burn uncontrollably within him. God addressed him directly, issuing a grave warning in Genesis 4 verses 6 to 7. "Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him." Cain ignored the counsel. Instead, driven by corrosive jealousy, he engaged his brother Abel in conversation. When they found themselves isolated in the open field, Cain physically turned upon his sibling, overpowering and brutally murdering him. The earth had witnessed its first fratricide. God immediately confronted Cain with a direct question. "Where is Abel thy brother?" Cain responded with humanity's first recorded act of outright denial and a chillingly indifferent counterquestion. "I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?" God's reply was devastating and absolute. Genesis 4 verses 10 to 12 records, "What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth." Cain cried out in despair that the severity of his punishment exceeded his endurance, expressing fear that any person who encountered him would instantly kill him. In response, God placed a protective mark upon Cain, ensuring that no avenger would harm him. Cain departed from the presence of the Lord and settled in the distant, restless land of Nod, located east of Eden. There, Cain established a city and began a lineage of descendants. His line eventually produced Lamech, a polygamist who took 2 wives and whose offspring became pioneers, the founders of nomadic tent dwellers and livestock breeders, the inventors of musical instruments, harps and organs, and the first great metal forgers of bronze and iron tools. Lamech, inheriting his ancestors' violence, arrogantly boasted to his wives in Genesis 4 verses 23 to 24. I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Meanwhile Adam and Eve had another son. Eve named him Seth, saying, God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. Seth, too, had a son, whom he named Enosh. Genesis 4 verse 26 notes the spiritual turning point. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. As humanity proliferated across the globe, a profound and disturbing moral corruption took root. Genesis 6 verses 1 to 2 vividly describes the catalyst. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Seeing this moral dilution, God declared in Genesis 6 verse 3, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Powerful, enigmatic giants known as Nephilim roamed the earth in those pre-flood days. Mythic mighty men of renown. But the true crisis permeated deeper than unusual intermarriages or powerful hybrid offspring. Genesis 6 verse 5 reveals the catastrophic state of the human heart. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This radical, relentless evil broke the Creator's heart. Genesis 6 verses 6 to 7 painfully records. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. Yet, in that ocean of corruption, one singular man stood apart. Genesis 6 verses 8 to 9 states, But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. God surveyed the terrestrial realm and saw that its fundamental integrity had failed. The world was utterly ruined, infested by rampant violence, for every single person had defiled their essential path. A decree of cataclysm was issued. God spoke to Noah with shocking news and detailed, impossible instructions. Genesis 6 verses 13 to 14 records, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and, behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. God provided Noah with the precise, colossal dimensions, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. It was designed to have 3 decks, a roof structure, and a single access door placed on the side. Then God unveiled the purpose of this structure in Genesis 6 verse 17. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life, from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But God established a profound covenant with Noah. He instructed him to gather his wife, his sons, and his sons' wives into the vessel. Furthermore, of every species of living creature, birds, animals, and everything that crawled, Noah was meticulously directed to bring 2 of every kind, 1 male and 1 female, to ensure their preservation. Noah was also commanded to collect and store all the necessary food supplies for the year-long ordeal. Genesis 6 verse 22 concludes the instructions simply and powerfully. Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. When the preparations reached completion, God issued the final command to Noah in Genesis 7 verse 1. Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. He specified that Noah should bring 7 pairs of every clean animal, 1 pair of every unclean animal, and 7 pairs of every species of bird. In precisely 7 days, God would initiate the torrential rains that would last 40 days and 40 nights. Noah proceeded with absolute obedience, just as God had commanded. He was 600 years old when the terrifying floodwaters broke forth. On the 17th day of the 2nd month, Genesis 7 verse 11 states, "The same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Rain deluged the earth for 40 consecutive days and nights. Noah, his family, and all the chosen animals entered the ark exactly according to the divine instructions." Then, Genesis 7 verse 16 adds the sobering detail, "And the Lord shut him in. The waters ascended higher and higher, lifting the colossal vessel above the ravaged earth. Every organism dwelling on dry land that possessed the breath of life perished." Genesis 7 verse 23 portrays the widespread devastation. "And every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and the creeping things and the fowl of the heaven. And they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. The destructive waters enveloped the earth for 150 days. Then, in a moment of sublime providence, God remembered Noah and every animal contained within the ark. He caused a strong wind to sweep across the earth, and the waters began their slow, massive recession. The ark eventually found ground and came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month. 40 days later, Noah opened a window of the ark and released a raven, which flew back and forth until the surrounding waters had dried up. Next, he dispatched a dove, but it found no dry foothold and quickly returned to the ark. 7 days later, Noah released the dove again. Genesis 8 verse 11 records the significant return. "And the dove came in to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. He waited another 7 days and sent the dove out one final time. This time it never returned. By the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the surface of the earth was fully dry. God commanded Noah to exit the ark with his family and all the animal life, instructing them to multiply and repopulate the earth. The very first action Noah performed upon solid ground was to construct an altar and offer sacrifices of some of the clean animals and birds to God. Genesis 8 verse 21 records God's heartfelt response. "And the Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done." God blessed Noah and his sons, reiterating the original mandate to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. He instituted a primal fear of humans within all animals and sanctioned them as food, imposing only one dietary restriction. They must not consume meat containing its lifeblood. God also established the serious, foundational principle of justice in Genesis 9 verse 6. "Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man." Finally, God sealed a universal covenant with Noah, his future descendants, and every single living creature. He promised in Genesis 9 verse 11, "And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. Neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth." As the tangible, visible sign of this profound covenant, God placed his rainbow in the clouds, declaring that whenever he saw it, he would remember his promise never again to obliterate all terrestrial life with a flood. Following the cataclysm, the entire earth shared a single, unified language and vocabulary. As people migrated eastward from the region of the mountains, they discovered a vast, fertile plain in the land of Shinar and chose to establish permanent settlement there. They conspired among themselves, saying in Genesis 11 verse 3, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." They utilized kiln-fired bricks instead of natural stone, and tar bitumen in place of traditional mortar. Then they conceived an audacious, pride-driven collective plan. Genesis 11 verse 4 records their bold aspiration. "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." But God descended to observe the sheer scale of the city and the towering structure the people were constructing. He noted their unified strength and ambition in Genesis 11 verses 6 to 7. "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Consequently, God scattered them from that place across the whole surface of the earth, and the construction of the ambitious city ground to a permanent halt. That site earned the name Babel, because it was there that God fundamentally confused the universal language of the world. The patriarchal line originating from Noah's son, Shem, eventually led to a man named Terah, who fathered 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran died prematurely in Ur of the Chaldees, his ancestral city, while his father was still living. Abram married a woman named Sarai, but she was childless due to infertility. Terah took Abram, Sarai, and his grandson Lot, Haran's son, and they departed Ur with the intention of traveling to Canaan. However, when they arrived at a place called Haran, they settled and remained there instead. Terah lived to the advanced age of 205 and died in Haran. It was then that God intervened and spoke directly to Abram, issuing a revolutionary command and an incomprehensible promise. Genesis 12 verses 1-3 records the mandate. Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. Abram immediately complied. At 75 years old, he gathered Sarai, his nephew Lot, all their amassed possessions, and every person they had acquired while in Haran, and they set out on the arduous journey toward Canaan. When they finally arrived, Abram traveled deep into the land, reaching the significant site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. God appeared there to Abram and stated clearly in Genesis 12 verse 7, "Unto thy seed will I give this land." Abram immediately constructed an altar to the Lord. At that place, a visible commitment to the God who had called him. He continued traveling through Canaan, moving his camps and flocks, perpetually building altars and openly calling on the name of God, proclaiming his faith in this new land. His journey was soon interrupted when a severe famine struck the region. This crisis forced Abram to seek refuge, and he went down to Egypt to live there temporarily. As they approached the fertile Nile Delta, Abram, acutely aware of the danger, spoke to Sarai, his wife, revealing his plan, as recorded in Genesis 12 verses 11-13. "Behold, now I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee." It happened just as Abram had anxiously predicted. When they entered the established order of Egypt, people were immediately struck by Sarai's extraordinary beauty, and high-ranking officials praised her to Pharaoh himself. Consequently, she was removed from Abram's care and taken into Pharaoh's massive royal house. Because of the perceived relationship, that Sarai was merely his sister, Pharaoh treated Abram with immense generosity, showering him with wealth. Sheep, cattle, donkeys, male and female servants, and notably valuable camels. However, the divine intervention was swift and terrible. God struck Pharaoh's entire household with serious, debilitating diseases because of his unwitting taking of Sarai. Confronted with this undeniable sign of displeasure, Pharaoh summoned Abram and demanded an explanation in Genesis 12 verse 18-19. His voice filled with outrage and fear. "What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why did thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why said thou, She is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to wife? Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way." Pharaoh, eager to be rid of the cursed presence, ordered his men to send Abram away immediately with his wife and everything he possessed. Abram departed from Egypt, not only unharmed but vastly enriched in livestock, silver, and gold. He traveled back north, retracing his steps to the very first place he had built an altar between Bethel and Ai, and there he once again called on the name of God, thanking him for his preservation and provision. Lot, his nephew, who had traveled with Abram from Ur, had also flourished, acquiring significant flocks, herds, and tents. The combined wealth of both households became too great for the localized land to support them living in close proximity, especially during times of grazing scarcity. Predictably, quarreling broke out between Abram's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen. Seeking peace and determined to prevent internal conflict, Abram approached Lot and proposed a respectful separation, saying in Genesis 13 verses 8 to 9, "Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdsmen and thy herdsmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left." Lot looked around, surveying the potential choices, and saw the whole Jordan plain. Near the settlements, it was exceptionally lush and well-watered everywhere, appearing as fertile and verdant as the garden of God before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Swayed by immediate prosperity, Lot chose the Jordan plain and subsequently moved his tents toward the city of Sodom. Crucially, the people of Sodom, near whom he settled, were notoriously wicked and sinned greatly against God. After Lot had chosen his path and departed, God spoke to Abram again, reaffirming and expanding his original promise. Genesis 13 verses 14 to 17 records the majestic command and declaration. "Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee." Sometime later, a coalition of kings from the eastern territories swept in and attacked the cities of the plain, including Sodom. In their devastating raid, they carried off all the goods and provisions of Sodom and Gomorrah. Worse still, they also took Lot and all his possessions captive. When Abram received news that his nephew had been captured and enslaved, he acted with decisive military speed. He gathered 318 highly trained men who had been born into his household and were loyal and skilled fighters, and he pursued the invading kings all the way to Dan. He launched a surprise attack at night, completely defeated the king's forces, and successfully recovered everything: the stolen goods, the people, and, most importantly, his nephew Lot. On Abram's victorious return from the battle, the king of Sodom came out to meet him. But first, Melchizedek, the mysterious king of Salem, which means peace, and priest of God Most High, intercepted Abram. Melchizedek brought out sustaining bread and wine, and then he blessed Abram, saying in Genesis 14 verses 19 to 20, "Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand." In profound recognition of God's role in the victory and Melchizedek's divine authority, Abram gave the priest 1/10 of all the captured goods. The king of Sodom then offered to let Abram keep all the recovered plunder if he would just return the people. But Abram refused the offer outright, determined not to be indebted to the sinful king. He declared in Genesis 14 verses 22 to 23, "I have lift up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread, even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." After this monumental victory and selfless refusal, God's word came to Abram in a protective vision, speaking directly to his fears. "Fear not, Abram. I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." But Abram, burdened by his advancing years and childlessness, questioned the promise. He asked what reward God could truly give him, since he remained without an heir, and his loyal servant Eliezer of Damascus was destined to inherit everything he owned. God responded immediately, denying Abram's assumption in Genesis 15 verses 4 to 5. "This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. Look now toward heaven and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be." Genesis 15 verse 6 then states something crucial and foundational to faith. "And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness." God then explicitly told Abram that he was the one who had brought him out of Ur of the Chaldees to give him this very land as an inheritance. Still seeking assurance, Abram asked how he could know he would possess it. God instructed him to bring specific animals, a heifer, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon, for a solemn covenant ceremony. Abram obediently brought the animals, ritually cut the larger ones in two, and meticulously arranged the halves opposite each other. As the sun was setting, a deep, trance-like sleep fell upon Abram, and simultaneously, a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. In that state, God spoke to him about the distant future of his descendants, foretelling hardship in Genesis 15 verses 13 to 14. Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them. And they shall afflict them 400 years, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. When the sun had finally set, and the darkness had fully enveloped the scene, a powerful and symbolic manifestation appeared. A smoking firepot with a blazing torch, representing the presence of God, passed between the pieces of the sacrificed animals. That day, God made a binding covenant with Abram, promising the vast, defined territory to his descendants. But the physical reality of the promise remained elusive. Sarai still had no children. Driven by traditional custom and desperation, she spoke to Abram in Genesis 16 verse 2. Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. Abram agreed to this proposal and slept with Hagar, Sarai's Egyptian servant. Hagar conceived quickly, and once she knew she was pregnant, she began to display contempt and arrogance toward her mistress, Sarai. Sarai, now consumed by jealousy, complained bitterly to Abram, who simply told her that Hagar was still her servant and she was free to do with her as she pleased. Sarai then began to treat Hagar so harshly and oppressively that Hagar fled, seeking sanctuary in the desolate desert wilderness. There, by a spring of water, the angel of God found her. He asked her where she was going, and after hearing her plight, he immediately told her to return and submit to Sarai's authority. He then gave her a magnificent promise concerning her unborn child, saying in Genesis 16 verse 10, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. The angel also told her she would have a son and that she should name him Ishmael, meaning God hears. For God had heard her misery. Hagar returned home in obedience and subsequently gave birth to Abram's son. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. 13 years passed, during which Abram saw no further manifestation. Then, when Abram was 99 years old, God appeared to him once more, issuing a profound command and confirming the covenant in Genesis 17 verses 1 to 2. I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. Abram immediately fell face down on the ground in awe. God continued speaking, instituting an eternal change. He renamed Abram, changing his name to Abraham, declaring in Genesis 17 verse 5, Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. God promised that a lineage of kings would descend from him and established an everlasting covenant with Abraham and his descendants through all future generations. He reaffirmed that he would be their God, and they, in turn, would be his unique people. The entire land of Canaan would be their eternal possession. God then gave Abraham the mandatory, physical sign of this covenant. Every single male among them must be circumcised. Specifically, every male 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born into the household and those bought with money from foreigners. God also changed Sarai's name to Sarah, meaning princess or mother of nations, and made a shocking, specific promise in Genesis 17 verse 16. I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Hearing this, Abraham laughed to himself, a blend of wonder and disbelief, thinking how a man 100 years old and a woman 90 could possibly conceive and bear a child. He tentatively suggested to God that perhaps Ishmael might be the fulfillment of the promise and live under God's blessing. But God was firm and precise, saying in Genesis 17 verse 19, "Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him." God promised to bless Ishmael too, affirming that he would become the father of 12 rulers and a great nation. But God's covenantal blessing and lineage would be established exclusively with Isaac, whom Sarah would bear at that same time the following year. That very day, in immediate obedience, Abraham took Ishmael and all the males in his massive household, and circumcised them, just as God commanded. One day, some time later, as Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent during the intense heat of the day, he looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. Sensing their importance, he hurried to meet them, bowed low in customary deference, and offered profound hospitality, saying in Genesis 18 verse 3, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant." He offered them water to wash their dusty feet and the promise of food to eat while they rested under the shade of a nearby tree. Abraham rushed back to Sarah and told her to quickly mix flour and prepare cakes of bread. He then ran to his herd, selected a choice, tender calf, and gave it to a servant to prepare without delay. He brought curds, fresh milk, and the roasted meat, and stood near the 3 visitors under the tree while they ate the lavish meal. They then asked a direct question, "Where is Sarah, thy wife?" Abraham replied that she was inside the tent. Then, one of the divine visitors spoke, giving the exact timeline for the promise in Genesis 18 verse 10. "I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son." Sarah, concealed by the tent entrance just behind him, overheard this impossible prophecy and laughed inwardly to herself, thinking about her own physical decay and Abraham's great age. They were simply too old for such intimacy and childbearing. God, hearing the silent skepticism, challenged Abraham directly, asking why Sarah had laughed and pointedly questioning whether anything was truly too hard for him, the Almighty. Sarah, now terrified and attempting to conceal her disbelief, denied laughing. But the Lord gently corrected her. "Nay, but thou did laugh." When the men got up to leave, they looked out across the valley towards the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. God, treating Abraham as a trusted friend, decided to tell him what he was about to do, saying in Genesis 18 verses 20 to 21, "Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it which is come unto me." 2 of the men continued on their way towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before God, ready to intercede. Abraham stepped forward, displaying immense courage and boldness, and asked in Genesis 18 verse 23, "Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked?" He began his intense negotiation, asking if God would spare the entire city if 50 righteous people could be found within its walls. God readily agreed that he would. Abraham, gaining confidence, continued bargaining downwards, respectfully asking about 45, 40, 30, and 20. Finally, he gathered his resolve and asked about 10 righteous people, and God graciously agreed to spare the city for the sake of just 10. The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening. Lot was sitting at the city gate, a place of honor, and saw them. He got up, bowed down to the ground, and urgently insisted that they stay at his house rather than expose themselves in the public square. They initially insisted on staying outside, but Lot persuaded them to come, and he prepared a meal for them. Before they had gone to bed, men from every part of the city, young and old, surrounded the house, forming a threatening mob. They called out menacingly to Lot in Genesis 19 verse 5, "Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them." Lot went outside, firmly shut the door behind him, and pleaded with them not to commit such a wicked act. In a desperate and shocking attempt to protect his guests, he even offered his 2 virgin daughters instead. The men of the city grew furious, shouting abuse and pressing forward violently to break down the door. But the two angels pulled Lot back inside and instantly struck the men at the door with blinding light, so they couldn't find the entrance to the house. The angels then spoke to Lot, revealing their mission, and asked if he had anyone else in the city, sons-in-law, and told him to get them out immediately because they were about to destroy the entire place. Lot rushed out to his sons-in-law who were engaged to his daughters and warned them earnestly. But they dismissed him, thinking he was merely joking about such imminent destruction. At dawn, with time running out, the angels urged Lot to hurry, emphasizing the mortal danger in Genesis 19 verse 15. Arise, take thy wife and thy two daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. When Lot hesitated, overwhelmed by the chaos, the angels took merciful action. They physically grabbed his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his two daughters, and led them safely out of the teeming city. As soon as they were outside the walls, one of them commanded in Genesis 19 verse 17, Escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. Lot, fearing the distant mountains, begged to flee instead to a small nearby town called Zoar, and they mercifully agreed to spare that little place for his sake. By the time Lot reached the town, the sun had risen fully. Then, Genesis 19 verse 24 paints a devastating picture of divine judgment. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. He violently overthrew those magnificent cities, the entire Jordan plain, all who lived in the cities, and every living thing growing in the land. Tragically, in her disobedience and lingering attachment to the life they were fleeing, Lot's wife looked back from behind him, and she became a lifeless pillar of salt. Lot was afraid to remain even in the small town of Zoar. So he and his two daughters left and went to live in a dark, isolated cave in the mountains. One day, the older daughter spoke to the younger, driven by a desperate necessity to continue their lineage, saying in Genesis 19 verses 31 to 32, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. That night, they executed their disturbing plan. They got their father drunk with wine, and the older daughter slept with him. The next night, the younger daughter did the same. Both daughters became pregnant by their father. The older had a son named Moab, who subsequently became the father of the Moabites. The younger had a son named Ben-Ami, who became the father of the Ammonites. Years passed, but God unfailingly kept his profound promise to Sarah. Genesis 21 verses 1 to 2 says, And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham named the miraculous child Isaac, meaning laughter. And in adherence to the covenant, he circumcised him when he was 8 days old. Abraham was now 100 years old when Isaac, the son of the promise, was born. Sarah was filled with a joy that she immediately shared, exclaiming in Genesis 21 verses 6 to 7, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. The child Isaac grew and thrived. When he was finally weaned, Abraham held a great, celebratory feast. But Sarah noticed Ishmael, Hagar's son, mocking Isaac, an act that inflamed her jealousy and resolve. She turned to Abraham and demanded in Genesis 21 verse 10, Cast out this bondwoman and her son. For the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. This distressed Abraham greatly, for Ishmael was indeed his flesh and blood son, cherished for many years. But God intervened, counseling Abraham in Genesis 21 verses 12 to 13. Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called, and also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. Early the next morning, Abraham, heartbroken but obedient, got some bread and a skin of water. He placed these meager provisions on Hagar's shoulder and sent her off into the wilderness with the boy. She wandered aimlessly and despairingly in the harsh desert of Beersheba. When the water was entirely gone, she put the exhausted boy under the minimal shade of one of the bushes and sat down about a bow shot away, thinking she simply could not bear to watch the child die of thirst. In that moment of desolation, God heard the boy crying out in his anguish. The angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and spoke words of comfort and instruction in Genesis 21 verses 17 to 18. What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then God miraculously opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water she had previously overlooked. She immediately filled the skin with water and gave the boy a life-saving drink. God remained with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the unforgiving desert and matured into a skilled archer. Sometime later, God tested Abraham's devotion in the most agonizing way imaginable. He spoke, calling out, "Abraham," and Abraham replied with immediate readiness, "Here am I." Then God issued the staggering command in Genesis 22 verse 2. Take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of. Early the next morning, Abraham responded with profound, silent obedience. He got up and loaded his donkey. He took 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had split and cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out immediately for the distant place God had told him about. On the 3rd day of their solemn journey, Abraham looked up and saw the designated place in the distance. He instructed his servants in Genesis 22 verse 5. Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. Abraham took the heavy wood for the sacrifice and placed it on Isaac's back, and he himself carried the essential fire and the knife. As the 2 of them walked on together, Isaac, now sensing the unusual nature of the journey, spoke up innocently. "My father," Abraham replied. "Here am I, my son." Isaac then asked the question that must have pierced Abraham's soul, recorded in Genesis 22 verse 7. Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham, maintaining his composure, answered with a prophetic assurance of faith. My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. When they reached the specific mountaintop, Abraham carefully built an altar and meticulously arranged the wood on it. He then bound his son Isaac, the heir of the promise, the child of laughter, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of God called out loudly to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" He answered instantly, "Here am I." The angel commanded in Genesis 22 verse 12, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Abraham looked up and saw, providentially caught by its horns in a nearby thicket, a ram. He went over, took the ram, and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham commemorated the incredible rescue and provision by calling that place Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. The angel of God called to Abraham from heaven a second time, reiterating the covenant with an oath in Genesis 22 verses 16 to 18. By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord. For because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Sarah lived to the advanced age of 127 years old and died at Kiriath Arbor, which is Hebron, in the promised land of Canaan. Abraham mourned deeply for his beloved wife. He then spoke to the native Hittites, seeking a permanent place for his dead, saying in Genesis 23 verse 4, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you that I may bury my dead out of my sight. He honorably purchased the cave of Machpelah from Ephron the Hittite for 400 shekels of silver, thereby securing his first permanent ancestral foothold in the land of the covenant. Abraham was now very old, and God had blessed him profoundly in every aspect of his life. He decided it was time to find a wife for his son Isaac. He called his most senior servant, the one who managed everything he owned, and made him take a solemn, binding oath, saying in Genesis 24 verses 2-4, "Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven, and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. But thou shalt go unto my country, and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac." The servant agreed, took 10 of Abraham's finest camels loaded with costly goods and provisions, and set out for Mesopotamia, traveling to the town of Nahor, where Abraham's relatives lived. He had the camels kneel down near the well outside the town, arriving just at the crucial time when the local women customarily came out to draw water. He then prayed a precise and heartfelt request to the divine guide in Genesis 24 verses 12-14. "O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. And let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, Let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink, and she shall say, Drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac." He had scarcely finished voicing this profound plea to the Almighty when, as if summoned by his very words, Rebekah appeared. She was approaching the well, her water jar resting gracefully upon her shoulder. She was exceedingly fair to look upon, a maiden pure and unblemished, a virgin known to no man. She descended the steps carved into the stone, filled her jar from the cool, life-giving spring, and then began her ascent. Abraham's servant, Eliezer, rushed immediately to intercept her, breathless with anticipation, and asked urgently for a drink. Without hesitation, she swiftly lowered the vessel from her shoulder and offered it to him, saying simply, "Drink, my lord." Having quenched his immediate thirst, she looked upon the large, thirsty train of camels, knowing the immense labor required to water them, and then uttered the words that sealed the covenant, recorded in Genesis 24 verse 19. "I will draw water for thy camels also until they have done drinking." With an energy and dedication that astounded the aged steward, she continued drawing water until all 10 of his powerful beasts had drunk their fill. The man, filled with a mixture of reverence and intense scrutiny, watched her every move, certain now of the divine confirmation. When the final camel was satisfied, he presented her with gifts: a heavy gold nose ring, weighing half a shekel, and 2 golden bracelets for her arms. He then inquired deeply, asking her parentage. She answered that she was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, who was the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother. Furthermore, she assured him, there was abundant space and fodder for his retinue at her father's house. The man immediately bowed low and worshipped God, marveling at the providence that had guided his steps so unerringly to the house of his master's kin. Rebekah, exhilarated by the encounter, ran swiftly home to relay the incredible news to her household. Her brother Laban, hearing of the gifts and the astonishing claim of the traveler, hurried out and welcomed the servant into their home. Eliezer then recounted his entire mission, detailing his solemn oath to Abraham, the precise nature of his prayer, and the miraculous manner in which God had led him directly to Rebekah. After listening attentively, Laban and Bethuel responded with a solemn acceptance in Genesis 24 verses 50-51. "The thing proceedeth from the Lord. We cannot speak unto thee bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before thee. Take her and go, and let her be thy master's son's wife, as the Lord hath spoken." The following morning, Eliezer was eager to begin the journey back to his master, but her family wished for her to remain a few days more. They turned directly to the maiden herself, asking for her immediate will in Genesis 24 verse 58. "Wilt thou go with this man?" Her response was instantaneous and resolute. "I will go." They imparted a blessing upon her, a wish for great fruitfulness and strength, and sent her on her way. Isaac, meanwhile, was walking in the field late one evening, meditating upon the events of his life, still carrying the sorrow of his mother Sarah's death. He looked up and saw the camels approaching. Rebekah likewise lifted her gaze and saw the figure of Isaac. She asked the servant who the man was, and when informed that this man was her master, she quickly took her veil and covered her face in submission and modesty. Isaac led her into the tent that had belonged to his late mother, Sarah, and he married Rebekah. As chronicled in Genesis 24 verse 67, "And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Abraham, having lived a complete life of 175 years, died at a ripe old age, filled with his years. His sons, Isaac and Ishmael, reunited in a shared act of grief and reverence, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, alongside Sarah. After Abraham's departure, God continued to bless Isaac. However, Rebekah remained barren, a great sorrow to them both. Isaac prayed fervently and persistently to the Lord on behalf of his wife, and God graciously answered his petition. Rebekah soon conceived. The pregnancy was troubled, as the infant struggled violently within her womb, causing her such distress that she sought divine counsel. The Lord spoke to her concerning the two nations she carried, saying in Genesis 25 verse 23, "Two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger." When the time of delivery arrived, she gave birth to twin boys. The first emerged covered entirely in a reddish, hairy coat, like a garment of skin, so they named him Esau, hairy. His brother followed, born grasping Esau's heel, and was therefore named Jacob, heel-grabber. Isaac was already 60 years old when these two sons were born. As the boys matured, their natures diverged sharply. Esau developed into a skilled hunter, a rugged man of the open country, while Jacob was quiet and reflective, preferring to dwell among the domestic security of the tents. Isaac harbored a strong affection for Esau because he enjoyed eating the wild game the boy procured. But Rebekah harbored a distinct preference for Jacob. One day, Jacob was meticulously preparing a flavorful lentil stew. Esau returned from the hunt, utterly famished and exhausted, near collapse from hunger. He burst into the tent and cried out to Jacob, his voice hoarse, recorded in Genesis 25 verse 30. "Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint." Jacob, seizing the moment of his brother's vulnerability and desperation, offered a calculated reply, "Sell me this day thy birthright." Esau, concerned only with the immediate relief of his physical agony, scoffed at the future inheritance, saying in Genesis 25 verse 32, "Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me?" Jacob insisted on a binding agreement and made him swear an oath of transfer. Esau, treating the immense value of his spiritual and material inheritance with contempt, willingly sold his birthright for a meager meal. Jacob provided him with bread and the lentil stew. Esau ate and drank hastily, stood up, and casually departed, demonstrating his complete disregard for his heritage. Genesis 25 verse 34 concludes the episode with a devastating indictment. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Years passed. Isaac had become old, his sight so dim that he was nearly blind. He called Esau, the son he cherished, to his side and, sensing his mortality, spoke to him in Genesis 27 verses 2-4, "Behold, now I am old. I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory meat such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die." Rebekah, who was always keenly attentive to her husband's private conversations, was listening from nearby. The moment Esau left the encampment to hunt, she summoned Jacob. She instructed him quickly to bring her 2 fine young goats, so that she might prepare the beloved dish for Isaac, substituting the goat meat for Esau's venison, thereby allowing Jacob to receive the patriarchal blessing before Esau returned. Jacob voiced deep concern that his father, despite his poor sight, would touch him, discover the smooth skin, and realize the deception. Jacob feared he would incur a curse instead of a blessing. But Rebekah was unyielding in her determination, declaring dramatically, "Upon me be thy curse, my son." She swiftly prepared the appetizing food, dressed Jacob in the familiar, distinct clothes of Esau, which she kept in her tent, and covered Jacob's hands and the smooth skin of his neck with the hairy skins of the young goats to mimic Esau's rough texture. Jacob, disguised, went into his father's tent and boldly declared, "I am Esau, thy firstborn." Isaac, confused by the voice which sounded like Jacob's but trusting the physical sensation, was highly suspicious. He felt the hairy hands and arms carefully. He asked again, seeking firm confirmation, "Art thou my very son, Esau?" Jacob, committing fully to the lie, replied, "I am." After consuming the prepared meal, Isaac was satisfied and proceeded to impart the irreversible blessing upon Jacob, saying in Genesis 27 verses 28 to 29, "Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee." No sooner had Jacob departed from his father's presence than Esau returned with his fresh game. He prepared the savory dish and brought it to Isaac, calling out, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's venison, that thou mayest bless me." When Isaac realized the monstrous deception that had just transpired, he trembled violently, seized by a terrible fear. He cried out in Genesis 27 verse 33, demanding to know, where is he that hath taken venison and brought it me? And I have eaten of all before thou camest, and have blessed him. Yea, and he shall be blessed." Esau, hearing this, emitted a great and exceeding bitter cry, begging his father to reserve even a small blessing for him. Isaac granted him a secondary, lesser blessing concerning dwelling in rich lands, but confirmed unequivocally that Jacob's authority over him was sealed. Esau wept uncontrollably, and then, his grief turning to murderous resentment, he plotted quietly in his heart, recorded in Genesis 27 verse 41, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob." When Rebekah was informed of Esau's violent intent, she immediately warned Jacob to flee for his life to Haran, to the house of her brother Laban, and to remain there until Esau's consuming anger had fully subsided. Isaac, unaware of the full extent of the drama, called Jacob and gave him explicit instructions for his journey, commanding him in Genesis 28 verses 1 to 2, "Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan-aram, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother." Isaac blessed Jacob once more, confirming the covenantal promise, and sent him away from Beersheba. Jacob set out alone on the arduous journey toward Haran. When he reached a certain desolate place as the sun set, he stopped for the night. Taking one of the stones lying nearby, he used it for a pillow and lay down to sleep. There, he had a profound, transformative dream. He saw a colossal ladder, or stairway, resting upon the earth with its apex reaching far into heaven itself, and the angels of God were ascending and descending upon it. The Lord stood above the ladder and renewed the covenant with Jacob, declaring in Genesis 28 verses 13 to 15, "I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac, the land whereon thou liest. To thee will I give it, and to thy seed, and thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth. And thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south, and in thee, and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee." When Jacob awoke from this terrifying yet glorious vision, he was filled with awe and dread. He mused internally, recorded in Genesis 28 verses 16 to 17. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." He took the stone he had used as a pillow, set it up as a sacred pillar, and consecrated it by pouring oil over the top. He named the place Bethel, House of God. Jacob then made a solemn vow, declaring that if God would indeed protect him on his journey, provide him with sustenance, and bring him back safely to his father's house, then the Lord would forever be his God. Jacob continued his journey and finally arrived in the region populated by the eastern peoples. He saw a well covered by a great stone, with 3 flocks of sheep resting nearby, awaiting their watering. When he inquired of the local shepherds, they confirmed they were from Haran. He then asked if they knew Laban, the son of Nahor, and they replied, "Yes, we know him well. Here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep now." When Jacob saw Rachel, his spirit was immediately stirred. He approached the well and, displaying great strength and eagerness, rolled the heavy stone away from the mouth of the well single-handedly, and watered Laban's sheep. He then embraced Rachel and wept aloud, overwhelmed by emotion at finding his kin. Rachel, astonished and elated, ran immediately to tell her father. Laban hurried out to the field, embraced Jacob and brought him back to his home. After Jacob had stayed with Laban for a full month, integrating himself into the family, Laban addressed the issue of compensation. He had 2 daughters, the elder, Leah, whose eyes were tender or weak, and the younger, Rachel, who possessed stunning beauty of form and feature. Jacob had fallen deeply, passionately in love with Rachel. He answered Laban's inquiry, recorded in Genesis 29 verse 18, "I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter." Laban agreed to the terms. Such was the intensity of Jacob's love for Rachel that the 7 years of arduous labor seemed to him like only a few fleeting days. When the prescribed time of service was completed, Jacob demanded his wife. Laban organized a great wedding feast. However, under the cloak of darkness that evening, Laban brought the veiled Leah to Jacob instead. In the morning, when the daylight revealed the cruel deception, Jacob was furious and confronted his uncle. Laban defended his actions with local custom, saying in Genesis 29 verses 26 to 27, "It must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also, for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years." Jacob, having no choice and bound by his love for Rachel, agreed to the terms and worked another 7 years for his true beloved. When the Lord observed that Leah was detested or unloved by Jacob, he bestowed upon her the gift of fertility. She conceived and gave birth to Reuben, then Simeon, then Levi, and finally Judah. Rachel remained barren, leading her to deep, jealous anguish. In desperation, she gave her personal servant Bilhah to Jacob as a surrogate wife, who bore him 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. Leah, fearing she would cease bearing children, likewise gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob, who bore Gad and Asher. Leah then bore 3 more children, Issachar, Zebulun, and a daughter named Dinah. Finally, God remembered Rachel's plight and opened her womb, and she gave birth to Joseph. Jacob, now rich and possessing a large family, settled in the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac had lived. Joseph, at 17 years of age, was tending the flocks with his older half-brothers. He often brought their father troubling or negative reports regarding their conduct. Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph more deeply than any of his other children, for Joseph was the son born to him late in his life, and Jacob symbolized this special affection by making him a magnificent, ornate coat of many colors. When his brothers saw this obvious favoritism, their simmering jealousy erupted into fierce hatred, such that they could not even speak civilly or kindly to him. Joseph had a powerful, prophetic dream, and when he recounted it to his brothers, their hatred for him intensified beyond measure. He told them, recorded in Genesis 37 verses 6 to 7, "Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf." The brothers immediately understood the insolent implication. They scoffed, "Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?" And they hated him even more profoundly for the audacity of his dreams and for the self-aggrandizing nature of his words. He dreamed a second, even more magnificent dream and shared it with his kin, saying in Genesis 37 verse 9, "Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." When he recounted this vision to his father and his brothers, even Jacob was moved to rebuke him, saying, "What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth?" While the brothers viewed him with utter envy, his father, though stern, carefully pondered the meaning of the saying. The brothers soon departed to graze their father's flock near Shechem. Israel told Joseph, "Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and bring me word again." When Joseph arrived in Shechem, a man informed him that the brothers had moved the flock further north to Dothan. Joseph followed them there and found them. When they sighted him approaching in the distance, before he was even close enough to speak, the brothers unanimously conspired to murder him. They spoke viciously to one another in Genesis 37 verses 19 to 20. "Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest, heard their murderous plan, and, seeking to save Joseph's life without immediately confronting his brothers, argued against bloodshed. He said in Genesis 37 verse 22, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him." Reuben's intention was secretly to return later, lift Joseph from the cistern, and restore him to their father. When Joseph finally reached them, the brothers immediately seized him, violently stripped him of his beloved coat of many colors, and brutally cast him into a pit. The cistern was dry and contained no water. They then sat down nearby, callously enjoying a meal. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites, Midianite traders, approaching from Gilead, their camels laden with highly valued spices, balm, and myrrh, heading down toward Egypt. Judah, seeing an opportunity both for profit and to avoid the guilt of murder, spoke to his brothers in Genesis 37 verses 26 to 27. "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." They agreed. They pulled Joseph from the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for the price of 20 pieces of silver. The traders then brought Joseph down into Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit, intending to execute his rescue plan, he found the cistern empty. He tore his clothes in despair. The remaining brothers took Joseph's distinctive coat, slaughtered a young kid of the goats, and soaked the garment thoroughly in the blood. They brought the soiled coat to their father, presenting it with feigned innocence, saying, "This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no." Jacob recognized the garment instantly, his heart breaking, and cried out in anguish in Genesis 37 verse 33, "It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him." Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Jacob tore his own clothes, wrapped his body in rough sackcloth, and mourned deeply for his son for many long days. All his sons and daughters attempted to comfort him, but he adamantly refused to be consoled, believing his beloved son was dead. Around this tragic period, Judah separated himself from his brothers and went down to live near an Adullamite man named Hira. There, Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite named Shua. He married her, and she bore him 3 sons, Er, Onan, and Shelah. Judah later took a wife for his firstborn son, Er, whose name was Tamar. But Er was wicked in the eyes of the Lord, displaying great evil, and the Lord brought about his death. Judah then instructed Onan, according to the custom of Levite marriage, saying in Genesis 38 verse 8, "Go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother." However, Onan knew that any offspring resulting from this union would not legally be counted as his own heirs. Therefore, in an act of defiant selfishness, he spilled his seed upon the ground to prevent conception. This act gravely displeased the Lord, who also slew him. Fearing that the same fate would befall his youngest son, Shelah, Judah instructed Tamar in Genesis 38 verse 11, Remain a widow at thy father's house, till Shelah, my son, be grown. So Tamar returned to her father's house, dwelling in isolation. Sometime after Judah's wife died, and once his period of mourning was completed, he traveled up to Timnath to shear his sheep, accompanied by his friend Hira. Tamar was informed that her father-in-law was traveling to Timnath. Observing that Shelah had fully matured and yet she had not been given to him as a wife, she realized Judah had no intention of keeping his promise. She cast off her widow's garments, covered herself with a heavy veil to disguise her identity completely, and strategically sat in an open place by the roadside leading to Timnath. When Judah saw her, he assumed she was a temple prostitute because her face was covered. He approached her, saying, "Let me come in unto thee." She asked him, "What wilt thou give me?" He promised, "I will send thee a kid from the flock." She was insistent, saying, "Wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it?" He asked what pledge he should offer. She answered in Genesis 38 verse 18, demanding significant objects of identification. "Thy signet and thy bracelets and thy staff that is in thine hand." He gave them to her, and he slept with her, and she conceived. She then arose and departed, removed her veil, and put back on her customary widow's garments. Judah later sent the kid of the goats via his friend Hira to redeem his pledge, but Hira could not locate the woman. About 3 months later, Judah received a terrible report, recorded in Genesis 38 verse 24. "Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom." Judah, filled with righteous indignation, decreed, "Bring her forth, and let her be burnt." As she was being brought forth to face execution, she sent the signet, bracelets, and staff ahead to her father-in-law, accompanying them with a message in Genesis 38 verse 25. "By the man whose these are, am I with child?" And she added a demand, "Discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet and bracelets and staff?" Judah recognized the distinctive personal items instantly. Humbled and struck by the truth of her actions, he acknowledged his own fault, saying in Genesis 38 verse 26, "She hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah, my son. When she gave birth, she bore twin boys, Perez and Zerah." Meanwhile, Joseph had been successfully transported and brought down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, who served as the captain of the guard, purchased him from the Ishmaelites. The guiding hand of the Lord was clearly upon Joseph, and he quickly became a man of great competence and prosperity. His master, recognizing that divine favor rested upon Joseph and caused everything he attempted to flourish, elevated him. Joseph found high favor in Potiphar's sight and was soon appointed chief overseer over his entire household, managing all his vast possessions. After this ascent, Potiphar's wife began to fix her lustful eyes upon the young, handsome Joseph, and she brazenly commanded him, "Lie with me." But Joseph steadfastly refused, explaining his position of trust in Genesis 39 verses 8 to 9. "Behold, my master walteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" She spoke to Joseph day after day, persistently trying to entice him, but he refused to yield to her advances or even to be near her. One day, fatefully, Joseph entered the house to perform his duties, and no other servant was present in the interior chambers. She violently seized him by his outer garment, demanding once more, "Lie with me." He tore himself free, leaving his garment behind in her hand, and fled desperately outside. When she realized he had escaped, leaving the garment as evidence of his hasty departure, she called the men of her house and falsely accused Joseph of attempted assault. When his master Potiphar returned and heard the fabricated tale from his enraged wife, his anger was violently kindled. He immediately had Joseph thrown into the royal prison, where the king's own prisoners were kept. Yet, even in the depths of incarceration, the Lord remained with Joseph, demonstrating his mercy and granting him favor in the eyes of the keeper of the prison. The keeper, seeing Joseph's diligence and integrity, committed all the prisoners and the management of the facility into Joseph's care. Not long after, the chief butler and the chief baker of the king of Egypt committed an offense against Pharaoh and were cast into the same prison where Joseph was confined. They both experienced disturbing dreams on the same night. Joseph approached them in the morning and noticed their evident sadness. He inquired about their distress, saying in Genesis 40 verse 8, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you." The chief butler related his dream first. Joseph interpreted that the 3 branches represented 3 days, and within those 3 days, Pharaoh would restore him to his position of service. Joseph asked the butler earnestly to remember him when he was reinstated and to mention his plight to Pharaoh. Next, the chief baker told his dream. Joseph interpreted that his 3 baskets likewise represented 3 days, but warned that within those 3 days, Pharaoh would hang him. On the 3rd day, which happened to be Pharaoh's birthday, he gave a great feast. He restored the chief butler to his post, just as Joseph had foretold, but tragically, he hanged the chief baker, exactly as the interpretation predicted. Despite his miraculous deliverance, the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but utterly forgot him. 2 full years elapsed. Then, Pharaoh himself was troubled by a series of vivid dreams. He stood by the river Nile and saw 7 sleek, well-favored kine, fat of flesh, emerge from the water and begin grazing. Immediately afterward, 7 other kine arose, meager and ill-favored, gaunt beasts that defied description, and these lean cows devoured the 7 fat cows. He awoke, deeply unsettled. He slept again and dreamed a second time. 7 good, healthy ears of corn came up on one stalk. Then 7 thin, blasted ears of corn sprung up and devoured the good ears. In the morning, Pharaoh's spirit was profoundly disturbed. He summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but none possessed the insight to interpret his visions. It was at this critical juncture that the chief butler finally remembered his forgotten benefactor and told Pharaoh about Joseph, the Hebrew young man who had successfully interpreted their dreams in the dungeon. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph, who was hastily retrieved from the dark dungeon, shaved, and presented before the ruler. Pharaoh recounted his troubling dreams. Joseph humbly stated that the power of interpretation resided not with him, but with God, and proceeded to reveal the meaning in Genesis 41 verses 25 to 32. The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored cows that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. Behold, there comes 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. Joseph then offered practical, divine counsel, advising Pharaoh to appoint a supremely discreet and wise man over Egypt to effectively manage the crisis, to gather and store 1/5 of the enormous harvest during the 7 years of abundant plenty, thus preparing the nation for the impending 7 years of devastating famine. This proposal was excellent in Pharaoh's estimation. He recognized the divine spirit in Joseph and addressed him in Genesis 41 verses 39 to 41. For as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh solidified this unprecedented appointment by taking his personal signet ring from his own hand and placing it upon Joseph's, arraying him in robes of the finest linen, placing a chain of heavy gold about his neck, and making him ride in the royal second chariot, signifying his absolute authority. Joseph was exactly 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh and began his rule. During the 7 years of overwhelming plenty, Joseph faithfully gathered and stored immense quantities of grain, corn as numerous as the sand of the sea. Before the famine arrived, 2 sons were born to him by his wife, Asenath, Manasseh, meaning making to forget, and Ephraim, meaning fruitful. The 7 years of tremendous abundance concluded, and the 7 years of great abundance concluded, and the prophesied 7 years of widespread famine began their deadly grip. The scarcity was absolute in every surrounding territory, but thanks to Joseph's careful administration, Egypt alone possessed grain. All neighboring nations were compelled to seek relief there. When Jacob saw the despair settling over his household in Canaan, he rebuked his sons, saying, "Why do you stare at one another, paralyzed by fear and hunger?" He then spurred them to action. "I have received word that there is corn in Egypt. Go down there at once, and buy provision, that we may secure our lives and not perish from want." 10 of Joseph's brothers set out, but Jacob refused to send Benjamin, Joseph's full brother, with them, fearing lest some terrible calamity should befall him on the way. Joseph, now the supreme governor of the land, was the sole distributor of the grain. When his brothers arrived, they prostrated themselves before him, their faces pressed into the dust, unknowingly fulfilling the very dreams that had caused their hatred years before. Joseph instantly recognized them, but he concealed his identity, adopting a stern, foreign demeanor and speaking harshly. "Where do you originate?" he demanded. They replied, "From the land of Canaan, seeking to purchase sustenance." Joseph's memory flashed back to his childhood visions. He accused them, saying, "You are spies. You have come to ascertain the weak points of this land." They pleaded, "No, my lord, your servants have only come to buy food." They offered a defense, explaining, "We are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in Canaan. The youngest remains with our father this very day, and one is no more." Joseph insisted they must establish the truth of their claim by returning with their youngest brother. He had them all detained for 3 days. On the 3rd day, he softened the terms slightly. "One of you must remain confined here, while the rest carry the necessary corn back to your families and return, bringing your youngest brother to prove your honesty." Overhearing this command, and believing Joseph could not understand their tongue, as he spoke through an interpreter, they were overcome with remorse. They spoke guiltily among themselves, saying, "We are truly suffering retribution for the crime we committed against our brother. We witnessed the deep agony of his soul when he pleaded with us, yet we hardened our hearts and refused to listen. Is it any wonder, then, that this severe distress has fallen upon us?" At these words, Joseph was so profoundly moved that he turned away quickly to hide his tears, retreating to weep in private. Returning to them, he selected Simeon and had him bound before their eyes. Joseph then ordered his steward to fill their sacks with corn and, secretly, to restore the money each man had paid back into his sack. At the first lodging place they stopped at, one brother opened his sack to get feed for his donkey and saw his silver. Aghast, he cried out, "My money has been returned. Look, it is here in my sack." Their courage failed them completely, and they were struck by deep terror, wondering what twisted fate now pursued them. When they arrived home and recounted the terrifying events to Jacob, they emptied their sacks and, finding all their money restored, fear multiplied within their hearts. Jacob lamented bitterly, "You have robbed me of my children. Joseph is gone, and now Simeon is gone, and you intend to take Benjamin away as well. All these misfortunes are laid heavily against me." Jacob swore that Benjamin would not accompany them back to Egypt. Yet the famine intensified its grip on the land. After they had consumed the corn from the first journey, their father reluctantly ordered, "Go again, buy us a little more provision." Judah stepped forward, appealing to him desperately, saying, "The man made it a solemn, binding oath to us, saying, 'You shall not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will certainly go down and purchase food for you. But if you refuse to send him, we cannot possibly go down.'" Judah then addressed Israel, Jacob, with an urgent life-or-death plea. "Send the lad down with me, and we will set out immediately, that we may survive and not perish, you, we, and especially our little ones. I personally guarantee his safety. You may hold me fully accountable for him. If I fail to bring him back to you, and set him before you safe and sound, then let me bear the blame forevermore." Their father Israel, seeing the undeniable necessity, conceded. He instructed them, "If this terrible necessity must be faced, then this is what you must do. Take the choicest produce of the land in your packs and carry them down as a gift for the man. A little balm, a little honey, various spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds. Also, take double the amount of money in your hand. And concerning the money that was found returned in the opening of your sacks, take that money again with you, for perhaps it was merely an innocent mistake. Take your brother as well, arise and go again to the man. May Almighty God grant you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother, Simeon, and send Benjamin back. As for me, if I must be bereaved of my children, then so be it. The men took the special gifts, the double money, and the young Benjamin, and they journeyed down to Egypt, presenting themselves before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin among them, he instructed his household manager. Bring these men into the house, slaughter an animal, and prepare a great meal, for these men shall dine with me at noon. The brothers were terrified at being ushered into Joseph's personal residence. They feared it was an elaborate trap because of the money returned in their sacks. They immediately tried to explain the situation to the steward. The steward calmed their fears, saying, "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid." He then brought Simeon out to them, releasing him from custody. When Joseph returned home, they presented him with their gifts and bowed down low to the ground. Joseph inquired kindly about their well-being and then asked, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he yet alive?" They replied, "He is in good health." He looked upon Benjamin, his own mother's son, and blessed him softly. "God be gracious unto thee, my son." Joseph had to rush away, his emotions overwhelming him, for his heart was deeply moved for his brother. He went into his private chamber and wept there until his sorrow subsided. He then washed his face, composed himself, and commanded, "Serve the food." They were seated before him, arranged in order of age, and Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than any of the others. A final, confusing test. Joseph then gave his household manager a specific instruction. Fill the men's sacks with provisions, as much as they can carry, and put every man's payment back in the mouth of his sack. But in the sack of the youngest place my cup, the special silver cup, along with his corn money. The steward followed Joseph's directions precisely. At dawn, the men were sent on their way. As soon as they had left the city and were a short distance away, Joseph told his steward, "Chase after those men, and when you overtake them, confront them and demand, 'Why have you repaid kindness with such wickedness?'" The steward overtook them and delivered the accusation. They defended themselves vehemently. "Why does my lord speak such words? Far be it from your servants to do anything of this sort. With whichever of your servants the cup is found, let him die, and we also will become my lord's perpetual bondmen." The search commenced, and, of course, the cup was discovered in Benjamin's sack. Tearing their clothes in absolute despair, they returned to the city. They fell before Joseph on the ground. Joseph sternly inquired, "What terrible deed is this that you have committed?" Judah, the one who had guaranteed Benjamin's life, replied, his voice heavy with defeat, "What can we possibly say to my lord? How can we speak in defense? How can we clear ourselves? God himself has exposed the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are now your servants, my lord, both we and the one with whom the cup was found." Joseph, executing the final part of his test, declared, "May I be spared from doing such a thing. Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. As for the rest of you, go up in peace to your father." At this devastating pronouncement, Judah stepped forward and delivered a long, moving address, detailing their father's frail condition and explaining how Jacob's very life was inextricably bound to the life of the young boy. He concluded his heart-wrenching appeal. "Therefore, I implore you, allow your servant to remain here as a slave to my lord in place of the lad, and let the lad return home with his brothers. For how can I possibly face my father if the boy is not with me, lest I witness the utter sorrow and tragedy that will surely descend upon my father?" Judah's profound act of substitutionary love shattered Joseph's self-control. He cried out, "Clear everyone out of the room." No one remained with him as Joseph finally revealed his identity to his brothers. He wept so loudly that the sound was heard throughout the palace. He said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Tell me, is my father still alive?" His brothers were utterly stunned, unable to answer him, overwhelmed by fear and shame in his presence. Joseph gently urged them, "Please, come nearer to me. I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, please do not be grieved or angry with yourselves that you sold me here, for God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. These 2 years the famine has persisted in the land, and there are still 5 more years to come in which there shall be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me before you to ensure your survival, to keep a remnant of your descendants alive on the earth, and to save your lives by a great and marvelous deliverance. So understand this. It was not you who sent me here, but God himself." He commanded them to hurry back and bring his father down to Egypt immediately. He threw his arms around Benjamin's neck and wept, and then kissed all his brothers, weeping upon each of them. News reached Pharaoh that Joseph's brothers had arrived, and the king was pleased. He instructed Joseph, "Tell your brothers this. Load your beasts and go, return immediately to the land of Canaan. Retrieve your father and all your households and come back to me. I will grant you the very best of the land of Egypt." Joseph provided them with large wagons for the journey and ample provisions for the way. To Benjamin, he gave a generous gift of 300 pieces of silver and 5 complete changes of fine clothing. They departed Egypt and returned to Jacob, proclaiming, "Joseph is alive. He is the governor over the entire land of Egypt." Jacob's heart failed him at first. The news was too great, and he could not believe them. But when he saw the grand Egyptian wagons Joseph had sent to carry him, his spirit was revived. Israel declared, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I draw my last breath." Israel took his household and possessions and journeyed south, stopping at Beersheba. God spoke to Israel in visions during the night, saying, "Jacob, Jacob." He responded, "Here am I." God continued, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down into Egypt, for there I will make of you a great nation. I will surely go down with you into Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again when the time is right." Jacob and all his numerous descendants journeyed into Egypt. The total number of souls who came was 70. Joseph prepared his chariot and rode up to Goshen to meet Israel, his father. Joseph presented himself, fell on his father's neck, and wept for a long time. Israel, overcome with joy, said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have finally seen your face and know that you are still alive." Joseph reported to Pharaoh that his family had arrived. Pharaoh told Joseph that his father and brothers could settle in the finest part of the land, in the region of Goshen. Joseph brought Jacob before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed the king. Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. The sum of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time approached for Israel to die, he called Joseph and made a final request. "If I have found any favor in your sight, I ask you now, place your hand under my thigh and deal with me faithfully and truly. I beg you, do not bury me in Egypt. When I pass away, I wish to lie beside my fathers. You must carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." Joseph swore an oath to fulfill his request. Later, Joseph was informed that his father was gravely ill. He took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. Jacob stated, "And now your 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you here in the land of Egypt before I arrived, are mine. They shall be counted as my own. Like Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine." Israel's eyes were dim due to advanced age. Joseph brought his sons forward. Israel extended his right hand and deliberately placed it on the head of Ephraim, the younger son, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly. When Joseph saw that his father had done this, he was displeased and tried to lift his father's right hand from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's. But his father refused, saying, "I know what I am doing, my son, I know it. He also shall become a great people, and he also shall be great. But truly, his younger brother shall be greater than he." Jacob then gathered his 12 sons and blessed each one, granting a specific prophecy for their future lineage. He solemnly commanded them to bury him in the cave of Machpelah with his fathers. When Jacob finished giving his final commands to his sons, he gathered his feet into the bed, yielded up his spirit, and was gathered to his people. Joseph fell upon his father's face, weeping over him. He commanded the royal physicians to perform the rites of embalming for Israel. The Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days. Joseph requested permission from Pharaoh to take his father's body to Canaan for burial. Pharaoh granted the request. "Go up and bury your father as he required of you." Joseph, all of Pharaoh's high servants, and the elders of Egypt journeyed with the family. They held a great and bitter lamentation at the threshing floor of Atad, and Joseph observed a period of mourning for his father that lasted 7 days. His sons carried him and buried him in the cave of Machpelah, just as he had commanded them. After the burial, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers. When Joseph's brothers realized their protective father was now gone, old fears resurfaced. They said to one another, "Joseph may finally hate us now, and will surely exact full vengeance upon us for all the evil we inflicted upon him." They sent a desperate message to Joseph, claiming their father had commanded them before his death to ask for Joseph's forgiveness. Joseph wept when he heard their words. His brothers then came themselves and fell down before him, declaring, "Behold, we are now your dedicated servants." Joseph reassured them tenderly, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God to judge you? As for your wicked intentions against me, God repurposed those intentions for good, to bring about what has happened this very day, the salvation of a vast multitude of people. Therefore cast aside your fear. I will continue to provide for you and your little ones." And he comforted them, speaking words of deep kindness and reconciliation. Joseph lived out the rest of his days in Egypt, surrounded by his father's household. Joseph lived for 110 years. He even lived to see the great-grandchildren of Ephraim. Before his death, Joseph prophesied to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely look upon you and bring you up out of this land and into the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. When God surely visits you, you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They had him embalmed, and he was placed in a coffin in Egypt, awaiting the day of deliverance. If this journey through the book of Genesis has illuminated something new for you, if you've seen these familiar stories in a fresh and deeper light, please do not keep this revelation to yourself. Hit that subscribe button so you can continue exploring the Bible narratives like never before. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the larger, divine perspective, a friend, a family member, or anyone searching for deeper answers about faith and purpose. The story of the covenant does not end here. Genesis is merely the foundation. There is so much more to discover, so many more threads of connection waiting to be uncovered across Scripture. Join us as we continue unveiling the Word in ways you have never witnessed before. Subscribe, share, and let us keep exploring together. See you in the next installment.